Hello and welcome back. Up to this point, we've been talking at length about AWS EC2. However, there is another compute platform provided by AWS that you should be aware of for the CSA exam, and that is AWS Lambda. So over here in the Orion papers, let's click on Account, then onto Compute, and then onto Lambda. Now, this is going to be fairly quick because you don't have to know how to use Lambda for the AWS CSA exam. You just have to be aware of what Lambda is and a few of its key attributes. So also over here in the AWS console, you can find Lambda under Compute right here under Lambda. So the first thing that you should know about Lambda is that Lambda is a serverless computing platform. So what does that mean exactly? Well, serverless means that you can run code without provisioning or managing servers. So for example, if you want to run code, you don't have to spin up an EC2 instance and install software. You can just create a Lambda function, as it's called, drop your code in, and execute it. Now, obviously, if you were to run code on an EC2 instance, you may need to scale out or scale up the EC2 instance compute capacity to handle demand in your code or to be updated if you change or modify your code. Lambda scales the required compute power automatically with your code, right? So serverless here. We're not dealing with actually managing servers. We're just giving AWS the code, and AWS is figuring out everything else for us. It's figuring out the type of compute power that's needed. We don't have to figure that out at all. And the great thing is that we only pay for the compute time we consume when running the code. And this is done down to the millisecond. So if I have code that I want to run and I hit the run button and it only runs for 1.5 seconds, well, then I only pay for 1.5 seconds of compute time. As where with an EC2 instance, whether I'm using spot, reserved, or on demand, right, I'm paying for more than just the time that the code is actually running because I kind of have to have an EC2 instance always running so that when I want to run the code, it's there for me to run. But with Lambda, that's not the case. So also important to understand is that by default, Lambda is highly available, fault tolerant, scalable, elastic, and cost efficient. It has all 5 components that we look for as a solutions architect. And it's also important to understand that Lambda integrates with many other AWS services such as SNS, SQS, RDS, DynamoDB. So there's a lot of default connectivity built into the service. So current supported languages for Lambda include Node.js, Java, C#, and Python. Now, what's also important to understand is when should you use Lambda over EC2? Well, generally, you want to use Lambda when you want to run code that is in response to events such as changes to Amazon S3 buckets, updates to an Amazon DynamoDB table, or even custom events generated by your application or devices. So what we can do with Lambda is we can set up triggers all throughout AWS to run code based on things that happen in our AWS account or in our application. So we can set it up so that a CloudWatch alarm will trigger an SNS topic, and then that SNS topic will trigger a Lambda function to run. So we can do something like whenever we upload a new object to S3, we can set up an S3 event to trigger a Lambda function. So say some action has to be taken on an object that we uploaded. So we can go back, and this is one of the earlier examples that we gave when we talked about S3 storage types. If we upload, say, a picture and we want processing to be done on that picture. So whenever that picture is uploaded to S3, we can trigger a Lambda function, which will then go grab the photo from S3, run the processing code on it, and that will be your Lambda function, and then deliver it back to S3. And we can set that all up to run automatically and integrate it because all of these services do work and communicate with each other. And the great thing is that you don't have to have now an EC2 instance set up to run the code to do the processing. You can just have a Lambda function set up and only pay for the few milliseconds or seconds that is running to process the image, as opposed to having an EC2 instance being provisioned for days on end and having to be always available and turned on for you to do that processing. So it really allows you to have the flexibility, the ease to not have to deal with EC2 instances when you just want to run code in response to events. So again, the key takeaways that you really need to know for Lambda, especially for the AWS CSA exam, is that one is that Lambda is serverless, meaning that you're not going to provision any EC2 instances. It runs code in created Lambda functions, as they're called. You are only billed for the actual time your code is running, and the currently supported languages include Node.js, Java, C Sharp, and Python. And it's great for executing code in response for events that occur in your AWS environment or specifically from your applications or devices. And with that, we will conclude this lesson. Thank you for watching. You may now move on.